Thanks for joining, everyone. And you're about to hear from four panelists on the question of what are NFTs, what value do they provide, and how are some of these people using them for their business. And we're going to get started with some introductions. So Jeff, how about you kick it off for us?
Sure thing. Thanks, Zach. Jeff Tannenbaum, founder CEO of Unreal Megacorp. We are working on what you would say is the next technology and a platform for the next wave of NFTs, most specifically in the artistic side of NFTs, adding additional real value for NFT holders, not just for average NFT holders, not just NFT holders who are whales. And I'm happy to get into more details, but I won't bore you guys just yet.
Okay, thank you. Quinn.
Hey guys, I'm Quinn. I run a company called Node Providers. We do backend infrastructure, sort of picks and shovels of the crypto space. We operate nodes, but we also design system architecture, and often that includes designing NFT structures or systems or use cases.
Hirsch or?
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rish Lotlekar. I'm co-founder and CEO of Superworld. Superworld's a virtual world built on top of the real world. We're in it right now. It's all around us in augmented reality. You can create, discover, and monetize anything, anywhere, including NFTs. And we've divided the surface of the earth into 64 billion properties. Each property is structured as an NFT. And if you own a property, you become a stakeholder at that location. And you're able to benefit from all of the monetization that happens there and the infinite number of filters on the world. Our mission is to enhance humanity and to build a better world.
Thank you, Rish. And Jack.
I'm Jack Lasky. I'm the CEO of NiftyJigs. And at NiftyJigs, our focus is helping the world provide trillions of NFTs to billions of users. When we talk about NFTs, when we talk about things like the metaverse, we're talking about serving a global audience, or at least that's what I really am passionate about. And so what our focus is as a company is providing the most scalable NFT technology possible to help support applications that are looking to serve billions and ultimately billions of users. We have a game called Durodogs, which is sort of the flagship game on our platform today. Through Durodogs, we have minted and our users are playing with over 600,000 NFTs. And we can mint an NFT for about 1/100th of a cent. And so looking forward to speaking more about what NFTs can do for a global population.
Well, thanks everyone for these introductions. And I'd like to get started with kind of an open-ended question for kind of each of the panelists. I posted in the chat some of the three questions to guide our discussion today. And as a reminder for all of these Unbounded Capital webinar series, if you have any questions for us or for the panelists, feel free to drop those in the chat, DM me, and we'd be happy to kind of get those in the mix. So yeah, to start, what do you think the popular conception of what NFTs are will evolve over the coming decade? And Jeff, I know you kind of got to this in your introduction. So what's the popular conception today, and how will that change?
As we all know, the easiest on-ramp to NFTs to date has been more on the artistic side, right? We started, in more recent years, we've been focused primarily on profile pics, PFPs. And PFPs have given people an opportunity to acquire an asset. Of course, those assets are mainly just JPEGs, and they don't have any depth underneath the hood. Sometimes there is added utility to be part of a club. And I've been in this space for a while, and we all have. And I think we've learned what the community is willing to embrace and what is too far advanced for them. At least that's been our understanding. Like, you can offer the community some advanced stuff and functionality on NFTs, but we found they're not ready for it yet. You got to keep it simple. You got to kind of stick with what is the status quo of the time and ease people into it. Anyway, bottom line is obviously NFTs can evolve to represent any digital asset. What interests me specifically most is the smart contract side. Smart contracts is what powers this. And the power of the smart contract is in my opinion, where the real value under the hood is. But I'm gonna stop talking and let somebody else chime in for now.
Well, and Jeff, just a quick follow-up question. So what are some of these more advanced use cases that you feel like will maybe be popular in months or years, but that your users are not ready for right now?
Sure. I mean, we can even, I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe DuraDogs even, right, is, stop me if I'm wrong, but it's more of a virtual pet approach. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the idea of a virtual pet on the blockchain it's pretty cool when you think about it. I mean, think about the Tamagotchi. No one can argue about the success of the Tamagotchi, the Furby. However, not enough people are yet even embracing that concept. They, at least in our opinion, it will become a more mainstream concept soon enough, but it's not there. You may have a very different view on that, of course, and I would love to have that debate. But anyway, so yeah, like even one step further, Tamagotchi, fully interactive NFT that can live, learn, grow, and obviously all the normal play to earn models that can come out of that, and virtual goods and airdrops, all that kind of fun stuff.
I totally agree. And I think that right now people have this really kind of tight, or they see the sort of primary product in the NFT space to this point, which is, static images, art, things like that, being very close, if not synonymous, with the NFT technology itself. An NFT, a token, it's really just a digital representation, in most cases on a blockchain, of something else, whether that thing is digital or not digital, in a case of Superworld, where it's, a digital representation of a plot of land in the world. And I think that term NFT, I could even see ultimately disappearing as the number of different things and the functions of those things starts to diversify and expand to the point where it no longer necessarily makes sense to group these all together. You could group Netflix and Amazon together because they're both websites, but really they're used for very different things. You don't go to them for the same reasons. They're not interchangeable. And I think the same thing will happen for NFTs, where right now it's technology, it's a buzzword, but ultimately I think that it's a technology that's so widely applicable that it'll sort of disintegrate into the background, where other use cases and kind of clusters of use cases will, I think, emerge as sort of independent industries.
I totally agree with the way Jackson put it. NFT is really just a new format to structure ownership, and ownership in any object that's important enough to have a title for. So land being very obvious. I've been working on a mineral rights title system. You could structure your land ownership so that all of the covenants and mineral rights and all of the easements and things that come off of land can all be digitized and make the title and transaction process simpler. And so then, look at, car ownership or registration or homes or anything else that you want that is important enough to document and have an actual title for that ownership. It works really quickly and easily with art. And that's why we've seen it with the JPEG, because what's important is not what the JPEG looks like. What's important is who created it, and, and the sort of economy and community around that, which is similar in art. We care about who painted and who created that art. So it's adopted very quickly there. But like Jack said, I think he's totally right that the name NFT changes into just title of, whatever the object is. We'll change the name to represent how it actually works.
I have a question about that, Quinn, from your perspective. Do you feel that it just becomes different classifications of digital assets? Like, NFT, we can call it, one classification these days is a PFP, we'll say, right? That's what are some of the other classifications that you're envisioning?
Jeff, just for everyone on the call, what is a PFP?
Pardon me, I'm sorry, a profile pic. Basically, you buy a Bored Ape, right? And one of the only things you can do with it today is you set it as your Twitter profile pic. And that's a cultural thing. It's these days it's a way to, it's like wearing your fancy watch. It shows off that, you have one, you're part of the club. So
Yeah, I think that current NFT sort of implies that there are fungible tokens and then there are non-fungible tokens. But really, any non-fungible token is just a title of ownership of something. And so what that thing is will change the name a lot more. So for instance, if we did it on real estate, we'd probably just call them titles. If we did them for a car, I guess we'd call that a title too. If you did it for, a smart contract, then we'd probably just call them smart contracts. Like if I own a NFT that shows that I have a contractual agreement with somebody else that they, owe me money or services in the future, we'd probably just call that a contract. The existence of a piece of code that is not fungible is kind of a silly way to describe it if you look at all the different things that we can do with it. If I'm making sense.
My thought on this is that there's a lot of very conventional use cases of these technologies, as was pointed out. So anything that we're doing more conventionally now can be replaced with NFT technology. And I also agree that a lot of the technology is going to be abstracted away. So we're going to look for the benefits of the technology itself, similar to how we look at the conventional uses of those technologies. But I also think that the power and very compelling aspect of utilizing these technologies in our real lives is the ability for us to, again, program these digital assets to do things that conventional technologies and conventional ways that we currently interact aren't able to do. And so I think the real impact here is not only the abstraction away of the NFT technology, which will happen, but ultimately being able to, again, seamlessly transact in ways that allow us to leverage the programmability of the asset in a generative way, potentially, to do things that, again, we currently can't do. And that's what I'm very excited about. Again, our focus at Superworld is enhancing people's real lives. And I think that enhancement of their lives and improving the world is going to come from a lot of the aspects of that technology that are elevating the current ways that we transact or work together or build together in that sense.
And Rich, what are some specific examples of what you're talking about?
Well, again, the beauty of this is currently we're using the words NFT and fungibility as kind of two kind of core ways of thinking about the blockchain or Web3 in this context. I think that again, the terminology will change and the classifications and the structures that we create are going to improve. I mean, I think we've seen some issues in the market in the last week or two with certain structures that probably didn't work as well as imagined. And I think that, again, there's going to be innovation in the structures and how this is defined and interoperability and, as I mentioned, kind of generative aspects of these contracts. What can be stored in terms of metadata, what kind of, interoperability that data can have across blockchains, across virtual worlds, across DeFi. And so, again, I think the ability to create value and accrete value is going to be the core to where this technology can be leveraged. And so, we currently think of some of these things as replacements for conventional ways of, again, a title, right? But what if you could, again, program a title to do certain things that, again, accrete value and enhance the process of buying and selling and owning in a way that, again, with kind of innovation on the computer science side, on the Web3 side, again, allow us to accomplish business goals that, currently we might not, think are possible. And I think that if you think of, non-human type interactions. I think that's one area where you're going to see NFTs because of the the trustless nature of the technology, being able for us to again to be able to interact with not only real people but with computers a lot more seamlessly.
So, Rich, can I ask a follow-up on that? I've
Yeah.
been playing around a little bit with Upland and Sandbox and Roblox and some of those virtual metaverse worlds. And I just noticed last week, Alfa Romeo just announced that they're going to do NFTs for registration of new automobile sales. So my question to you is, if you're a brand like Alfa Romeo or any sort of Pepsi, whatever it is, and you want to interact and operate with multiple metaverses, how do you do that? Like, how does the interoperability work so that I could drive a car in one world and then, have some sort of representation in another? How complex is that technologically speaking?
Currently, it's still a challenge to be able to fully bring an NFT across a virtual world. However, I think that is one area where we're focusing a lot of our time and efforts, especially as we at Superworld, and we're very close to Sandbox and Upland and Decentraland and others. We are working on kind of creating standards for that type of interoperability, and so I think it'll take some effort, collectively in the community, as well as in the innovation side of the community, to kind of build the right frameworks to make that happen. So currently it's hard. In Superworld, as an example, we do have NFT collections in Superworld from other places all the time. And the way we do it currently is they bring in content that is brought in through, AR, VR, 2D, 3D, any type of medium in terms of content. And then there's a link kind of corresponding to that content that takes you to whatever marketplace the NFT is sold. So we're kind of, we've created an easy workaround for that. But that's the end goal is to how can we make that very seamless to where you can, really import into an NFT and use an NFT in an environment as a virtual car in that example that you gave. But I think the more simpler use cases of, again, just bringing in an NFT or having one in your inventory and being able to showcase it or use it for some real world interaction is going to be much more, I think, a more straightforward use case. So if I bought that Alfa Romeo, can I go to an event in the real world and show that off in a wallet? And regardless of where I bought it, I have it in a wallet. So those kinds of things I think are obviously much more available now, but it's going to get better.
I have one other question too, and this is for Jeff. So Jeff, you have a background in Silicon Valley as an investor. So I'm really curious from your perspective now, wearing the hat of a CEO, and now what is the viewpoint of Silicon Valley venture capital towards NFTs and towards Web3 in general? Are you, what kind of reception are you seeing, and where do you think it's going?
Well, Mike, let me tell you, it's so I believe there are a number of really sharp investors that are on the forefront of Web3 and have been thinking about Web3 for years, and they're not scared of it at all. I mean, a great example is Andreessen, right? They are not shying away from Web3 at all. They're doubling, tripling down on it. There are a lot of gaming type funds that are completely embracing play to earn models, right? And the tokenomics side of things. And okay, so a lot of funds are trying to claim their Web3. Some truly have partners that have been younger partners, let's just say, that have been playing in Web3 for a while and feel very comfortable there. So it's like you can't go in pitching, oh, we've built an NFT collection. This is something that's going to be hot that you should be investing in, Mr. VC or Mrs. VC. It's more about you got to be building platform level technology right? The picks and shovels type stuff that one of you just mentioned, right? The stuff that powers Web3 is what's very, we'll call it sexy right now from an investment perspective. Where I think we're beyond marketplaces at this point, in my opinion. Like if you came to me and said, oh, we're building another marketplace like an OpenSea, I think that's kind of just like old school now. I think you got to be working on that next gen type of thing in Web3. But it's hot for the right type of people. I think you just got to be talking to the right investors. Now, I just talked to a play to earn company, game type company that's popping up now. And they didn't raise their deck. If you look through their deck, it's the complete inverse of any deck that any of us from the Valley are familiar with. It doesn't have a problem. It doesn't have a solution. It has tokenomics at the core of the whole deck, the play to earn model, and they raised all their money on what are they called again now? Not safes, but SAFs. Yeah, pardon me. Right. They just don't believe in that equity model. There's no reason to. And there's a lot of people that are happy to participate. They've carved out parts of their funds for tokens, or their funds that are completely based on tokens. Hope that kind of answers your question.
And Jeff, just to follow up on that, what do you think? Because your background is as much as an investor as an entrepreneur. And have you invested in SAFs? And what do you think about the long-term viability of investing in SAFs?
I have not personally. Not that I wouldn't. It's a crazy bet, right? It's like with any investment, it's a pretty crazy bet. And truly, it sounds so cliche. You're betting on the team. You're really betting on the team. Are they gonna deliver? I think a big problem with the play to earn stuff and the NFT space as we know it today is there's a lot of, pardon my language, BS. There's a lot of non-founders, I'll say people that aren't professionals that are getting involved. They're doing, unfortunately, a lot of rug pulls. They're creating a bad atmosphere. I mean, look, we're all part of a community that we're trying to lift up, but you gotta be very extra cautious, I'd say, with token offerings. You gotta decide, are these people in it for a quick win, or are they real operators? Do they have a history? Do they know what they're doing?
Jack, what are your thoughts on this? Also kind of having experience in both the investment and entrepreneur side, what do you think about SAFs and some of these other topics being discussed?
I think that I agree that, team is extremely important. And I think that one of the main risks that I would see is that, team is not like a static thing. A team is, gonna be not just a function of the individuals in that team at that time, but also kind of their passion for or their belief in the project they're pursuing. I think one of the challenges with like tokens is that you're kind of subjecting yourself to like this very volatile public market type of speculation at a really early stage in a company. And I think that you sign up potentially to get bad signals as to whether or not you're being successful, and also potentially bad signals as to whether or not your project is no longer viable based on where the market has landed on your token. And I think that in a bull market, having a token which is going up with everything else, I think is a big boon for development, because it's money that you can use to build a great project, and that can flip really quickly. Now, as far as like, would I want to own the token? There's not that many tokens I've seen that I would want to own. That's just my evaluation. I'm thinking of it more kind of how might this help or hurt, the company that has produced this token.
Just for me to kind of weigh in here, something we've seen a lot and is probably the most common structure for startups doing things with tokens now is not actually to raise on a token, not just to raise an equity, but to basically do both, where they raise and then investors get either some like pro rata combination of equity and tokens, or sometimes like not pro rata, and you have some mainly token investors, exclusively token investors, and some exclusively equity, but there's also tokens and they have the opportunity. And the biggest problem that I see is just the misalignment based on liquidity. So when you have some investors that can get liquidity in 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, that puts a type of pressure on the founders that's different than maybe how do I build longstanding equity value, where maybe I get liquidity in 7 to 12 years after getting millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of customers. So just for, and again, when our fund first started, we invested in some tokens ourselves, and a lot of this, what I'm saying, is kind of seeing a lot of the folly of, I think, the companies that did this and then had founders that were much more focused on making sure their token price got up soon rather than building great products. But to get back to the focus of today, which is NFTs, one question that I wanted to get everyone's opinion on is the Bored Apes Yacht Club an example of an NFT success? And why? Anyone feel free to jump in here. Jeff.
Happy to comment on. I mean, I think, look, it's a cultural phenomenon. It started at you. I think you got to look at it. It's sort of where it came from. It was an experiment. It was truly a social experiment from some sharp guys that they understood crypto in general. They didn't have deep technical knowledge, but they had great storytelling skills. They knew what they knew they wanted to create a great story, and they did. And timing, you name it, a bunch of factors here. But I mean, would any of us, I don't know, I don't want to speak for the group, would any of us argue, if we had been the creators of Bored Ape, would we argue with the overwhelming success that we were seeing? I wouldn't. I think on a sort of a professional level, if it even matters, management wise, they have to grow, they have to learn. I know they have a new CEO, and I believe she's doing a great job. I mean, I don't have too much insight into that, but yeah, it for an experiment, I'd say it's an overwhelming success. I don't think there's many experiments that have been that successful. And I think they have inspired a lot of people to get into the NFT world. Like, you need some of these winners like Bored Apes to inspire average people to want to collect, to want to learn more. I mean, it's how a community grows. It's how a community is built.
Who else wants to weigh in on the Bored Ape question?
Yeah, I would say that definitely would qualify that as a major success. At the end of the day here, part of this structure that we are building is a way for people to come together collectively around certain causes, whether we think of a DAO structure or just Web3 more collectively. I think that the ability for people, to have a certain goal in mind, and that goal can evolve as we're seeing in different communities that exist. And again, utilizing the technology as it evolves as well. And I think you're seeing that in Bored Ape Yacht Club as well. So ultimately, if we go back to kind of what the purpose of it all is a very passionate group of people that are leveraging these technologies to, again, pursue things that they make them happy, which I assume that's what's happening there. And that's our focus at Superworld as well, is how do you get people to come together around a mission? Our mission is build a better world and empower people in their lives and enable people to, what I call, live to earn, do things that they're passionate about. And so again, it's less about the specific technology, whether they use NFTs in real estate, whether they create NFTs, whether they're using AR, VR, whether they're using AI, whether they're using other aspects of Web3 or other technologies. It's less about that, and it's more about, do people understand the movement that they're getting involved with? Are they passionate about that movement, or are they mobilizing. And that's I think the characteristic that you need to look at, and that's clearly what's happening with Bored Ape Yacht Club.
It's hard to say that they're not a big success, but I'll do my best to give some counterpoint here. I thought it was really interesting seeing the Yuga Labs pitch deck, which I don't remember if it leaked accidentally or was just made public. What I thought was interesting about it was that you didn't necessarily think of Bored Apes as like a metaverse project, but the pitch was not necessarily look like what we did where this is sort of the future. It was look like what we did. We're going to take this amazing brand we've cultivated and then put that into building a metaverse. And that's really kind of the future of the company. And I think that it's interesting that it seems as though they see this sort of like, they see the ceiling on like the PFP model potentially, and what they think about what should we do with, you know, all this capital that we've been able to bring into the company, both through the projects themselves and through investment capital, is, hey, let's go and let's build a metaverse. So that doesn't necessarily mean that Bored Apes was a failure. Of course not. I just think it was interesting to see that, you know, what is the future of this company? It does not necessarily look like what got them to this point by their own plan.
Quinn, any thoughts on Bored Apes?
You know, I don't know a whole lot about what they built in terms of use case for the owners, so I'm not quite sure. I mean, I assume what they did was they did a really good job at community management and building, you know, a community that was trying to build something. The technology that they were doing was sort of an experiment. I mean, a lot of the early NFTs, like the ETH rocks, were sort of an experiment in how the technology worked. And now there's a bit of cargo culting on that with the JPEG idea and building art, because there was such good success with Barry Yacht Club and with ETH rocks and a couple of the other early ones that, oh, if I go build an NFT, it'll be worth value. And then there's a lot of pile on in the trying to build something that's going to sell for more value, and it sort of dilutes what it was originally created for. I don't really know enough of the story of the Barry Yacht Club to know what they built.
Well, Mike, I see in the comments you asked about, you know, gaming seems like the first frontier for NFTs. Can you say more about why you think that's the case? Maybe not everyone on this call might agree or be aware of what's happening in kind of gaming and NFTs.
Well, I just think if you look at sort of the first wave of the internet, gaming played a pretty big role with Zynga and Facebook. And the reason it was, you didn't have to be 9 nines of bulletproof SLA for an enterprise organization. So what we ended up seeing is a lot of tests and experiments around games. And I think we're seeing the same sort of cycle happening now, where gamers tend to be more advanced. They tend to try new technologies. They tend to fail fast. And so I would consider metaverse a form of gaming as well. So I just think we're seeing a lot of, you know, like Jeff's company, Jack's company, they're all doing games. And so I guess the question that I ask is, if you look at the first, I'm trying to map this cycle to the last one. And after gaming, you know, the internet, you know, we know how that unfolded, and it became a really big enterprise play as well. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we get from here to sort of the bigger play in the NFT, not just NFTs, but in the whole Web3 world? Like what's next? Like what verticals do you guys think are the next frontier?
Right. You got the question. There are many next big plays here. Right. Again, in my opinion, and maybe it's an ignorant statement, it's the power of a smart contract. Right. If you know, there's inputs, there's outputs, and there's a permanent ledger on the chain. What can you do with that? It's a simple question. It's like, hey, what can you do with a piece of code? And what can that code be used to not automate, but formalize, contractualize to some extent, right? And like Jack was saying, you know, if it's real estate, it was Quinn, I guess. You know, whether it's titles, I mean, titles, so much power there, right? Because there's real value under the hood on a title. And we could probably say that the way the world works now, you know, in paper, doesn't need to work that way. Things can be completely digital and definitely on the blockchain. What else? What other transactions inputs and outputs from a smart contract can change an industry, can change things. So I think I would be asking that question. I mean, also, I mean, look, there's I'll mention a few things that I've observed that, you know, maybe they're investment opportunities, maybe not. But okay, when you look at the fact that the blockchain is, for the most part, anonymous, right? We don't even, like, if you want to buy an ad, even though you can't because it's financial, let's say you want to buy an ad unit and target a specific group. Who are you targeting? Who are the owners of NFTs these days? Can you describe them to me? I would have thought that an overwhelming majority are in that gamer younger age, like the younger side of gaming. Well, it turns out, I mean, I've done some surveys on LinkedIn. You know, I've surveyed my peer group, and 38% own NFTs of like my peer group. And that I find is mind-blowing, actually. That's a really amazing number.
Yeah, actually, I see a really big opportunity in e-commerce downstream from gaming. Jeff makes a really good point that I think that a big part of the value of an NFT is that it makes it easier to plug into other types of technologies. Like, it's hard to put a digital pet into a smart contract directly. You don't necessarily put, you know, like the spine animation file into a smart contract, but you can represent that digital pet with a token, which now you place inside of a smart contract. I think the same kind of thing is true when you consider payments. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of micropayments. I think that micropayments, smaller payments, go hand in glove with digital products, which can be represented by NFTs. And I think that with gaming, what you really do is you sort of cultivate a place for digital goods to have meaning, have utility, and have value. And I think that that's something that brands of all types can take advantage of. And an example that I like to use is, you know, a company like Nifty Jigs. Let's say that we have, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are making crypto payments that are much cheaper than a credit card and who are utilizing NFTs inside of games. A company like us could go to Nike and say, hey, let our users buy shoes with their crypto payments. You'll save money, maybe $5 a purchase because of the difference in fees, and then provide a digital twin NFT, which they can use with their avatar in the metaverse, mint that on our platform for like 0.25 cents to what we charge our customers. That's a great deal. And I think the reason that that deal is not being taken is because the users aren't there. There's not necessarily, you know, the critical mass of people who want to make crypto payments to buy something like a pair of Nikes yet. But I think that's coming. And I think that what games does is it provides this sort of fertile ground for NFTs that can be digital twins or just sort of associated with any type of e-commerce product, and help not only add value to customers by providing that NFT digital twin, which now can be used inside of a gaming environment, but also as a way of bringing other technologies, whether it's smart contracts or alternatives from a payment standpoint. I think that gaming can be that wedge vertical that brings not just NFTs, but all types of blockchain associated technologies to other verticals. And I think e-commerce is a place to look as in terms of what comes next.
We have enough data exhaust now on the blockchain that someone needs to make sense of it. All these people that are buying NFTs, that are transacting, how do you map this to marketing data? How do you start tagging these people? I mean, I'm a believer everybody is entitled to their anonymity on the blockchain. And I know the whole anti-Facebook movement, you know, you don't want your information bought and sold, and that's fine. No problem there. I agree with, I'm in that camp. But how do we know that wallet ID X likes Nike shoes, is male, lives in Des Moines, and whatever else? Okay. Well, we do know that they transacted these transactions on the blockchain. They have the spending power, maybe, kind of. It's hard. That's even hard to figure out. But we should start building knowledge around it, knowledge tools. Imagine an API that you can look someone up and kind of figure out who they are without knowing their name, but profile them, right? That's worth a fortune to the next wave of consumer companies that are trying to target people. I'd be willing to pay for that to sell, you know, some of our NFTs, right? Like I'd love to be able to target those people. So that's one thing. Another thing, a very simplistic concept.
And, hey, Jeff, let me just, so about that, you've said prior that, you know, transactions on blockchain are anonymous, but you also kind of want to do that. How do you reconcile those two things?
I'm sorry, can you just ask the question again? Maybe I misheard you.
So earlier you said that, you know, basically all transactions on a blockchain are anonymous, but you want to do this targeting. So I'm just wondering how you would go about doing that, and basically, can those two things both be true at the same time?
Yes, yes, they can be true. So when I say anonymous, and you know, everybody here is an expert in their own way in the blockchain, so you know, please someone debate this with me. But basically, if I know your wallet address, you come to my e-commerce site, you come to bananarepublic.com, and instead of connecting, you know, paying with your Visa, you come and connect your wallet, right? Using MetaMask or whatever, Coinbase wallet. We know your wallet address. Well, we can query the blockchain. It's a public ledger. And we can look up that you've spent this much money on the following tokens. Let's just say, I'm just talking tokens now. So we know that you like Dura dogs. We know that you like other things, right? That you, right? We have some data about you. We don't know your name, but we have data about you. And doesn't that help? It helps so much in deciding what we're going to show you after you log in to our site. What type of products may resonate with you? What colors you like? If you've collected 500 NFTs and most of them are blue or have a tone of blue, well, then I should show you the blue pair of Nikes, right? Or I should show you the blue, you know, shorts or whatever. And because you're more likely to buy. That data does exist. It's loose right now. It's, you know, but let's just assume that that data set's gonna 100x, 1000x over the next just few years.
You know, I think to add to that, I would, and I agree with both of the points that were made about this is, you know, I think the beauty of this is we're creating ecosystems that are going to be created in a variety of categories all around, you know, again, service providers and utilizing NFT technology as an example to, again, enable those owners of those NFTs to transport them across parts of their lives, and those, you know, ecosystems that are going to be built around these specific NFTs, whatever they are, whatever category that they're solving. It's going to, you know, I think a good analogy that Yatsui used, founder chairman of Animoca, is it's kind of like how when cars were first just created and you were able to, you know, create an auto shop to now, you know, fix cars, and then you could create tires for cars, and you could create radios for cars, and alarm systems for cars, and all kinds of things for cars. And those cars were able to be transported, and you were able to create different kinds of cars. And so I think that's kind of a similar thing that is the next big opportunity here. I mean, whether it's data on the marketing side, as was just mentioned, or gaming, or, you know, real utility art, you know, use cases, cleaning up the planet, the oceans, the, you know, reforestation, you name it. There's going to be a variety of kind of use cases here that we can use the technology for. And I think you're going to see these ecosystems form around different types of NFTs. And I would say that the category that I think is going to be most impactful is the ones that are real world based, not just necessarily gaming. I think gaming always has popularity, but I think the part where we can, again, bring value to the mainstream audience and abstract away the technology and add value to what they're doing in their real life is where the most interesting opportunities are. And that's what we're focused on as well at Superworld.
Okay, so one last question here. Something that I know a lot of the folks attending here today like emailed me about is just, we're all talking about kind of what use cases are maybe possible in the future, what we're excited about. What blockchains today are best for actually interacting with NFTs? Quinn, if you want to get us started here, what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, so it really depends on what your use case is with the NFT. I mean, they all just made good use cases for what the next frontier looks like. I'm really focused on like infrastructure NFTs. I know I didn't get to answer the last question, but focused on like NFTs that are involved in local city governance or in real estate title or in hard financial assets that pay out. And so for those, what I've been looking at a lot are specific federation protocols. So protocols that are built with a specific use case in mind, where you have like a governing body of a number of companies that are involved in that space, so that you can build a blockchain that's based on super high transaction speed with semi-trust or semi-decentralization, where you have a number of arbiters that are making the decision that so long as you trust the consensus of that group of arbiters, you can trust the transaction, and then it's a lot faster and cheaper. So for super high data NFTs or transactions require lots of inputs, lots of outputs, and a lot of data moving across the chain. I think that specific chains for a specific use case can make a lot of sense, but it very much depends on what you're doing. I think that
are there any specific blockchains that you've seen that are good for NFTs?
Yeah, so Shift, for example, is one that we're working on that's very specific to KYC. So when you're using attestations or NFTs that are KYC management, the reason it's good is because it's high transaction speed, very cheap cost. You can governed by a bunch of big names in space, Galaxy and a bunch of it's semi trust semi decentralized. So long as you trust the big names that are operating it, you get all the benefits of a faster, more centralized blockchain. But obviously, Bitcoin is the one that I'd talk about for anything that you're looking at high value on, though that sort of has the opposite of the lower transaction speed, higher fees, but at least you have the immutability to know that your transaction is governed by the consensus of everybody operating in the Bitcoin network. So I guess that's my answer. Bitcoin, and then for specific use cases, look at your own protocol. There's my answer.
Thanks, Quinn. Any other panels, feel free to jump in here.
If you want to, in the simplistic sort of, just like that, or to the current layer of NFTs with visuals, I think it just depends on the value of that NFT, right? So you want to sell a high value piece of art, let's say, by high value, I'm saying $600 or more, maybe. So maybe you'll want to choose to sell that on Ethereum. If you want to sell a lot of little tiny items, inexpensive swords, inexpensive just gaming items, maybe you're going to want economically, you're going to want to do that on a low transaction cost network. So maybe you'll do it on Polygon. Right? It just depends what the use case of the NFT is, like Quinn was saying. But that's today's perspective. I mean, we actually, when we originally pushed out one of our collections, we put it out on Polygon, but there's a downside to putting it on Polygon. Most NFT buyers these days keep their money in Ethereum. Everything's in ETH. So if you want them to jump over and buy in Matic, which is Polygon, basically you're asking them to just like move some money around. And some would argue that's easy. It's not so easy, right? Polygon isn't a default chain in MetaMask wallet. So you got to add it. Of course, there's automated protocols that do that for you, but it's just like simple little things. Like it's like e-commerce 101. You got to eliminate as much friction as possible from the purchasing flow in order to increase your sell-through. So why push something out on Polygon, which requires more education for the consumer, if you could push it out on Ethereum? But of course, there's higher transaction costs. So the profile of the person buying on Ethereum is like they're not as price sensitive, right? Because you're going to have higher gas fees. Whereas on Polygon, the gas fees are fractional cents. It means nothing. So there's pros and cons to all of it.
I agree with Jeff. I think that the considerations are also pretty different between like a platform like ourselves and an application. Because I think when you're talking about an application, the technology exists to bring NFTs from one chain to another. And I think that as blockchains emerge, they become kind of clearly better for one use case or another. You could have issued a collection on Ethereum and move somewhere else if that is required, or allow some of your users who want to do certain things to take those NFTs elsewhere. And so, I think if you're an application and your primary goal in the short term is revenue, then Ethereum is probably your best bet, as Jeff mentioned, especially because the NFT buying community, that at least as far as I can see, tends to be like somewhat small in terms of total number of people, but the average purchase size is relatively high. So, even the highest fees in the industry outside of like extreme outlier events are not going to be a huge barrier to those types of purchases. As a platform, taking a very different stance where, we're trying to enable applications that are very unlike anything that's being done today from a scale standpoint. And that really, I think, restricts your options to networks that both are extremely high performance today, and also where there's significant confidence that at increasing scale, that performance will stay. We chose Bitcoin SV because that was the only network that we felt confident about both of those things today. That being said, I still think that, most of the NFT communities elsewhere, and so a big challenge for us is how do we have such a dead simple onboarding, or even ways of bringing NFTs from other chains, or bringing users who have something like ETH, for example, that they're holding most of their NFT budget in. How do we bring them into an ecosystem that is much more scalable? And I think that's going to be a challenge for at least a number of years while Ethereum's dominance persists.
Rich, any closing thoughts?
I think the landscape of protocols, layer 1, layer 2 protocols, I agree with the point of view that there are definite characteristics of those protocols that lend themselves to certain types of NFTs or communities. And some of them are bigger than others, and some of them have very, very strong passionate users that are interested in certain types of NFTs even. And so I think that's going to always be the case as new ones come out and other ones are created or improved, whether it's Ethereum or something else. However, I think ultimately we're going to move to more of a interoperable structure over time, and that's going to come pretty fast. In the sense that you're going to be able to do these transactions because you might have just a more I guess an understanding of the fact that you're going to have to be more interoperable across these chains, just even on the holding side of this.
And we're sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be hopping off in a little bit. I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists here today for being part of this webinar. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Rish. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Quinn. It's always a pleasure to be hosting these things. And for everyone that's still waiting, yesterday we published some research just on the scalability of different blockchains and kind of which blockchains in an empirical way are getting maybe faster as more people use them, are getting cheaper, or getting more expensive. And I think for anyone kind of thinking about the questions of which blockchains to use for different things might find that helpful. And yeah, we'll probably do our next webinar in a month or so. And any suggested topics or things that, especially our regulars here want to hear more about or learn more about, feel free to shoot us an email. And yeah, thanks so much for coming. And everyone that got this, you'll get an email from me tomorrow with the YouTube link for the full webinar. Thanks, everyone.